I've been thinking a lot about daycare lately, not in a weird way, but in the way that was genuinely the happiest I've ever been way. And I think I can finally understand why, since it's been so long, right? I remember the smell of the graham crackers, or the goldfish, whatever it was, playing the games with the kids you didn't even know whose last names you never knew. How easy it was to make friends just by being in each other's space and playing games, or that's what we did at least. And when I think about it now, it's almost too much to describe. The sound, the smells, the way the light came through the old windows. It was all just too good, too full of life to ever really explain to someone who wasn't there. It's one of those little things where you had to be there to understand it, and words can't really touch what that felt like, the purity of just being of it. And so like I questioned why did it feel so good, because there was zero pressure back then, no expectations, no performance, just the competition between who wins in the video game, like Super Smash Brothers or Mario, whatever we were playing, right? And you didn't have to be anyone yet, you just were there, present. There was unconditional, acceptance. You could cry, laugh, be messy, and still be loved because you lived in the present. No past regrets, no anxiety about the future. Connections, came naturally to you, and the friendships formed just by proximity and play. And you were safe, the adults handled all the hard stuff, so you could just exist. You were allowed to feel everything, the joy, sadness, confusion, and none of it made you weak. That freedom, that permission just to be, that's what made it really special, looking back on it. But somewhere along the way something shifted. When did just, being there stop being enough? When did just existing just stop being enough? And when did we learn to hide our emotions? When did making friends become more complicated? And when did we start, performing instead of playing? And that's when childhood innocence met adult expectation, and everything kind of changed from them. I hear people say all the time, they wish they could just go back to being a kid, and back to life was simple. But to be honest with you, I don't think it would feel the same anymore, because even if you could go back now, somehow step back into that daycare room, you wouldn't see it in the same light, in the same eyes, because you've lived too much, you've felt too much, you've grown. And that's kind of the bittersweet part of it. You can't unlearn, growing up and getting older. It's just gonna happen. And sometimes I even think about my life just 5 years ago. I was 12, I still don't have no bills, technically no pressure because I'm still in high school, but I graduate this year, 2026, or I guess next year, whatever. But I back then there was no fear of that, no fear of the future, because everything felt so simple then. Now I'm 17, almost 18 in a few months, and somewhere between then and now I grew up, not all at once of course, but just piece by piece, every year, every day, every month that went by, moment by moment, until I looked up and realized I wasn't a kid anymore. I looked back and 6 years passed by, and it's really wild to think that 6 years ago, almost now, next April, we moved, me and my family moved into our new house. And it's crazy because we're closer to 10 years living here in this house than we are to just moving in. And that blows my mind. Time moves like that slowly while it's happening, but all at once you look back, you just see it. You just see all of it and see how fast it really felt. And you always probably want to go back to those older times. Sometimes it's not even the childhood you miss, it's just maybe the last year. I catch myself doing that a lot, thinking about how my life was 6 months ago to like a year ago, how different things were to now and how they feel compared to now. And it's sometimes it is a massive difference, a big difference, and it usually is. So yeah, like I said before, I'm 17, turning 18 soon. I'm going to be an adult, but I know one day I'm going to be 25, maybe pushing 30. And I wonder how I'll look back on these exact days I'm living right now. Will I miss, the way things felt when I was 17 or 18? Because, that's the thing, time doesn't, just stop. Years will go by all of a sudden, but, when you're 17, you might wish to be 7 again, but when you're 30, you would probably do anything to be 17 again, even for just a day. And, I feel like we've kind of lost something, and maybe that's kind of what hurts the most, is because we didn't grow up, we lost maybe our old, innocent selves along the way. We lost part of ourselves along the way. You might have lost your permission to be vulnerable. We lost, the ability to live in the moment. We've lost communities built on, just being there rather than performing 24/7. And we might have lost the belief that we're enough just as who we are, and we traded, wonder for constantly worrying all the time. And the worst part is we didn't even notice it happening. You just kind of wake up and that's your mindset every day. But here's the thing, you can't just go back, but you can bring pieces of it forward. You can reconnect with your inner child. That's not like embarrassing or childish or weird. It's it's trying to heal and be an adult, but also let that inner child come out of you in a way, because they're still there. They're still in there waiting for you to remember, right? You can feel the joy without needing a reason to. You can build connections based on presence, like how you were when you were a kid. The version of you, the one who laughed without holding back, who loves without fear, they're still there. They didn't just disappear when you grow up. They just got quieter and more defensive. That younger version of you has been waiting for you to slow down and to look around and to remember. Sometimes I think about what the kid version of me would say if he saw me now. I wonder if 6-year-old me would he recognize me? Would he be proud of everything that I've accomplished, everything that I've done? And would he tell me to stop trying so hard to be someone and just be again? And maybe that's what connecting is really all about. I don't know. It's not about going backwards. That's not what it really means. But letting that that inner child, that kid that's still in there, just letting it move forward with you instead of trying to outgrow it. I know I can't go back to daycare, but I can't remember what it taught me, that I was enough just by existing. That connection, it should be simple, and that joy doesn't need a reason to just be there. And maybe we all need to remember that. One last thing I want to ask you is, even if you could go back knowing everything you know now and all the experiences you've had from then to now, would you go back? I hope this video helps someone out there.